You're listening to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo, Andy Hughes, and Samantha Powell.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of What's on Your Bookshelf. We are a podcast, which is personal and professional growth podcast, exploring the intersections of passion, potential, and purpose. I'm Andy Hughes, and I'm joined here by Denise Russo, Sam Powell, and our producer, Scott Miller. We are very, very happy to have you again here on the podcast. We are on a lot of different platforms. We're actually on Apple Podcasts now, among many others, such as Spotify, you name it. Every platform, we're pretty much out there now, and we really appreciate all of the great feedback that we've gotten on the past few episodes. So Denise, Sam, really excited to have this conversation with you guys again today.
Awesome to be here. So good to be with you, and glad you're back with us, Andy.
Yeah, so excited.
Yeah, it's awesome. I had a little bit of a different perspective on the last episode. You guys were talking about kind of an introduction to the book, CoachWooden, The 7 Principles That Shaped His Life and Will Change Yours by Pat Williams. And I had a different perspective because I was actually just able to kind of be a listener, right? And listen to the episode, and just reflecting back on it, there were a lot of great things that were brought up. And one thing that really spoke to me was the importance of John's father and just having, that figure in his life. And it got me thinking, back to when I was even playing sports back in the day. Anytime I was struggling or something, I always had my mom and my dad to kind of help me get through that in the right way, right? Being maybe giving constructive feedback, but also being positive and really dedicating time to make me improve in whatever I was trying to do. And so that really spoke to me as well. And I'm sure a lot of people, I know we've gotten some great feedback on a lot of these episodes. So just really, really excited to dive into this one. Today, we're actually going to be talking about Principle 2 in the book, which is help others. And, this is something that we can go on and on about helping others. It's one of the basic pillars of leadership, if you will. So again, really, really happy to be back with you guys here. And just to start us off, Sam, I know there was a kind of a story at the beginning that Pat kind of talks about in this second principle. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that and how this book gets started?
Yeah, this was an interesting start to the chapter because it starts with helping others. And the first line, Denise, you loved it, right? It was that Coach Wooden was honored with his first of 7 NCAA college basketball's Coach of the Year awards. And so it starts with, he's sitting in this crazy moment of being honored as a Coach of the Year in his field. And it kicks right over into where a coach came up to him who coached for another school and basically said, "Hey, we don't have any experience in this one area. Can you help us?" And Coach Wooden was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's sit down and let's talk about it." And so what ended up being "Hey, we just want your take on this, even though, we're here because we're honoring you in this gigantic award." And then they sit down and they talk for 90 minutes about, all the questions that this coach has and things like that. And it ends with, this story that this chapter kicks off with ends with Coach Wooden saying, "Dale, I really enjoyed spending time with you, but I could have saved you a lot of time if I had just told you my secrets of coaching." And I laughed with that because it just reminds me as a leader, especially, you've got to ask the right questions to get the right answers, right? They talked for 90 minutes, but Coach Wooden, the Coach of the Year right here in this moment, would have given you his secrets to coaching had you just asked for them. And, I think it's a lesson in help too, and in what that looks like, right? When you're asking for help, when you're giving help, giving it very freely is what this chapter is really all about. And asking for it too, right? There's the other side of it is just ask for the thing that you really want and what that looks like. I literally said that to my son last night. His tablet has hours limitations on it, and he was hitting his limitation. A little notification popped up, but he had 7 minutes left of some sports video he was watching, but he only had 5 minutes left on his tablet. And he just casually said that, and I looked at him, I'm like, there a question you have? Is there help that you want from me? Because if you want something, you got to ask for it. I know it's uncomfortable, but you got to ask for it. So, it was a nice little lesson, but I laughed because I thought about this chapter. And then, the best part about it is the book goes right on to give us those 3 secrets of coaching. I know, Denise, you loved those. So I'd love to know what you thought about those 3 secrets to coaching, because they're an interesting kickoff to this chapter.
Yes, I loved this part of the book in the intro to chapter 3, which is principle 2. But it got me thinking when you were just telling the story about Austin that you don't get what you don't ask for, but you should be prepared that when you ask for something, be prepared for what you're going to get. Like in this story with Dale Brown asking Coach Wooden, it reminds me of a story that I heard from John Maxwell. John Maxwell was a mentee of Coach John Wooden, and he tells a story about how one time he was getting his first opportunity to meet Coach Wooden in person and flew out to where he was. And they went to this place where, if you read the book, and I really highly recommend anybody listening to get a copy of this book from Pat Williams called Coach Wooden, or any of the books that are written about Coach Wooden. And in the books, it talks about how Coach loved helping people. And one of the ways he loved doing that was in this cafe. And that the cafe even was known as kind of like a hangout place where people would go just to crave listening to the wisdom that Coach Wooden would share. So one time, John Maxwell was meeting with him at this cafe, and he said that when he sat down with Coach at the table, he pulled out this giant legal pad full of 6 pages of questions. In fact, John Maxwell has a book called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. In fact, this is a class that we've taught frequently with leaders in business. And so John was prepared. He had 6 pages of notes. So John Wooden said to John Maxwell, "Oh my God, you're the only person that has ever come that prepared to ask me questions, but I'm so excited to dive deep into these questions." And so it turned out that they get to the end of their time together. Let's say it was a 90-minute meeting like the Dale Brown meeting. And Coach Wooden invited John Maxwell to his house. So he got not only that 90 minutes, but he spent the entire rest of the day going through the questions, which then led to a very fruitful mentorship relationship over years after. And many times after that, John Maxwell has shared his stories of being mentored by John Wooden, which have now inspired and ignited learning and wisdom into people like ourselves who have learned from John Maxwell, either personally or through the books he's written. And so there's so much here that Pat Williams has shared that hopefully will share another bit of help to our listeners, and it sure has for me. And so what you're talking about, Sam, is literally on the 2nd page of this 3rd chapter, which says that Coach told Dale Brown 3 tips for success and wisdom. Number 1, make sure you always have better players than the team you play. So number 1, have better players than the team you're playing. Well, it just goes to make sense in the sports world that people are putting up big money to have the best players on the team. Why would you want people that are so far down on the list? In fact, if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball starring Brad Pitt, what an awesome movie. That's a baseball movie, but it talks about how you maneuver getting the best players on your team. So in terms of business, why would you not want to hire the right best person, but then stagnate them or put them in a box and not let them thrive and flourish on the things you hired them for? And not just their past success, but for their potential to do even more for your business based on whatever that one thing was that you wanted to hire them for. The second thing that Coach Wooden said was number 2, make sure that your players put the team above themselves. And we're going to talk about that more in the podcast today. But what that said to me is that this is all about teamwork. And I can think of many stories of athletes who don't do that well. They want to be the star. They want to be on the front line. They want to be the guy taking the shot or hitting the ball. They want to be that star, and they forget that they are a part of a team, and that when you put the team above yourself, it's the team that then works. The third thing that Coach Wooden said is that, and this is a very important point, always practice simplicity with constant repetition, and you will be successful. So what that said to me was that you don't just show up and suddenly you're successful. There has to be repetition around it. In fact, I remember this was another lesson I had learned from John Maxwell years ago, where he said, don't think that just because I'm an effective communicator that I'm just up here winging it. I've done this for 50 years. I've been telling stories and teaching lessons and living life. You don't just suddenly one day step on a stage and everything that you've ever wanted is going to come to pass. You have to have some repetition. Same like you were just saying, Andy, as a former athlete, I'm sure when you first started out playing Little League, that it took you having to do things over and over and over again with your dad and your mom and your coaches helping you to get the mechanics of the game right. No different than in business. When you start out in business, you don't start out as the CEO. You work your way through by learning different things. But the key part of this lesson is about...
That reminds me, there's a point of that I think is so important that we miss a lot. Because it can be really boring to be really repetitive, right? It's like, oh, I always want to learn something new. But, if you go back to sports, like you're saying, and you think about it, right, there are fundamentals of every sport. And so like when you say that, what you mean is, okay, for baseball or softball, for example, right, fundamentals are throwing, catching, hitting, running bases, right? It's the basic things. And so when you're younger and when you're learning, when you're early on in your baseball career, you practice those things over and over and over again. Same thing in business, right? I can think back to when I started my career on a help desk. You picked up that phone over and over and over again. By the end, I could give you my greeting on the phone. Hi, this is Sam. Thank you for calling such and such. Right? Like I could still do it. I could pick up a phone call and jump right into that customer service like space because I've done it so many times that it's now ingrained in me. But the thing that we miss about that all the time is when you practice something over and over again, what you do is you build your tolerance for the basic things really big, and they become second nature. They become what we call muscle memory, right? Like I throw. My motion for throwing is just ingrained in me. I don't have to think about my throw. So when I don't think about my throw, that opens my mind up to allow me the space to think about where's the best place to throw. I don't have to think about the mechanics of throwing, right? Like I don't have to think of the mechanics of picking up the phone and greeting you. I can already be opening up the ticket. I can be opening my notepad to take the notes on what I'm doing, right? Like my brain, my active functioning in my brain is used for something else because I've built the muscle memory, but it only comes from that repetition and that, and that space over and over again. And that's where we can really, I think, like if we're thinking about helping others and what this chapter's about, we can help people practice things over and over again. We can give them the space that allows them to do that, right? I'm thinking to, kids I've watched play sports too, right? I can see the kids who are super smart and they're too in their head. And it's like, all right, we got to go build this kid's muscle memory in this space so that he can use that brain power. She can use that brain power. They can use that brain power for something else, right? Because it's there, right? And giving them that space to really be what they can be. And so when I think about how do I help others as a leader, as a coach, when it comes to like these principles, right? I get the best person on the team. I create a team environment. And then I help them with the things that become the repetitive muscle memory and open them up for greater critical thinking and moving and, actioning and things like that.
So Sam, what this gets me thinking about is there's these 4 stages of learning or wisdom, and it can apply whether you are someone new in business, if you are a leader in business, if you are a coach, or if you're a parent. And the first phase of that is called unconscious incompetence, which means you don't know what you don't know. So it's outside of your span of awareness. I think we talked last time even, or maybe an episode before, about the blinders on a horse, for example. You cannot see what you don't have awareness of. The second is, so you've got unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. The next step is conscious incompetence. It's like, you don't know it. So if you go back to the example where you were talking about either our kids playing sports or when we started playing sports as a youngster, we knew that we weren't going to be the next superstar at whatever that sport was that we were playing. We knew we weren't. But we had to get to the point of the simplicity and the basics, like you're talking about, Sam. You move from conscious incompetence to something called conscious competence, meaning you have to think about, as like a young little leaguer or a young hockey player or a young golfer or a young basketball player or a young soccer player. Okay, what am I going to do? You think about it in your mind first, you believe something about it, and then you take action on that thing. Same in business. You're new at your job. You have to maybe look at the manual to remember what you're typing or what you're saying or what you're doing. It's conscious competence. But through repetition and doing these things over and over again, you become to the fourth stage, which is unconscious competence, meaning now you don't have to think about it. It's like you said, Sam. If you know how to throw a ball, you don't think about, okay, first I need to take my arm and put it a certain way and then throw the ball. If you know how to stand and have a stance at a tee and your golf ball, you know with unconscious competence what the next step is as you look down at the ball before you take a swing. So the unconscious competence is the master level. And I think that what we're seeing throughout this book is that Coach Wooden mastered unconscious competence in helping others, which is the purpose of this chapter. And so when we think about it, he also did it with zero expectations. So Sam, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this piece about why do you do the things that you do?
Oh, yeah, there was the quote in the book, for those of you that have the book, it's on page 66. It says, when you help others, you don't do it expecting anything in return. You just help people because it's the right thing to do. Yet it always seems to work out that when you help other people, you help yourself as well. Like, I don't know how many times that's been true in my life. I don't know if you guys have stories from that or if there's places in that, but gosh, that resonated with me on such a deep level. You just help people because it's the right thing to do. But every time I get something out of it, or, you watch other people like blossom as they help somebody. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that resonates with me a lot too. And it's funny because me and my wife were watching a show, Suits. I don't know if you guys have watched it before. And every time one of the lawyers helps one of the other lawyers, they always say, okay, well, now you owe me one. That made me think of that. That's really not really how it should be, right? I mean, we should never really expect something in return. Like you said, Sam, like I can't even think about the number of times that's happened to me too, where maybe somebody reaches out and says, hey, can you look into this? And maybe it's a question I've never been asked before. And after I'm done, I end up gaining value out of it. Like now I know what to do if I get that question again, or if I have that situation. Mm-hmm. So yeah, at the end of the day, like even for me, like when I'm helping someone, it gives me a lot of joy to help people, whatever it may be. It's not something where I'm saying, hey, okay, like you owe me one now after I did you this, this favor, whatever it is, or I helped you with this. So yeah, that really resonated with me as well. Not only just in like my work life, but also just my personal life. I love helping people, and I don't think we should ever expect something in return. I think it's just the right thing to do, like you said.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, Andy, it's not quid pro quo. It's not do something because you want something. You do something because it's the right thing to do. In this chapter, it talks about an example of where John Wooden made certain that nobody on the team was the shining star. It was the team that was the star. And he said that he was teaching that the job was to set somebody else up for success. So if I take that in terms of business, for example, I can remember plenty of times as a people leader where I had opportunities that people that reported to me didn't have. Maybe it was somebody I knew or a topic that they had a little awareness of, or maybe their title wasn't big enough to open a door they wanted. But if you are a good people leader, you will open the door and you will set someone else up for the shot, which is what it's called in the book. Now, maybe that means that you bring somebody along to learn. You actually introduce someone to someone else. In fact, right before this episode started, I was sharing with Andy and Sam that there's somebody that I want them to meet. And there's nothing really in it for me other than to share someone in my network with them that could help them advance what they're doing. So there's no harm in being able to share your Rolodex, if you will. Like, that's probably an outdated statement to say, but I can remember way back in my early part of my career, I was working in the music business, and there would be plenty of times that people would hold that darn Rolodex so close to their chest. They didn't want people to have their contacts. Why? Just because it was preventing them from getting something, being something, having something, or doing something? Or could it have opened up an opportunity by giving someone the setup for a shot to help them be successful? And I think nowadays there are so many people that are just in social media jealous, right? They look at posts and they think, oh, well, that could have been me. Or why does that person get all these opportunities? Or when is it ever going to be my turn? Or, but it's not about that. It's about helping set up somebody else for their next best shot and helping make their dreams come true, like it says in the book. And he goes on to even talking about how it's the character traits that produce an admirable human being that also make better teams and better players. And so throughout the story that we see here, there was a beautiful story where it was talking about players that absorbed this concept and what Coach Wooden taught them. So what they would do is they would be taught that they had to open up the shot for someone else and pass the ball to someone else. And in doing so, when you received the ball from someone, you had to point back at them and show a gesture of gratitude, even if when you got the ball, you didn't sink it and get some points off of it. It was the point of the matter that someone opened the opportunity to help you to be able to take a shot. And Sam, I know this resonated with you as well. So do you want to comment on this part?
It really did. I loved that, right? Like I played basketball growing up. My dad's a basketball coach, and I loved that thought process. It made me think of hockey, actually. In hockey, you get points as an individual player, right, for an assist and a goal, or a goal, right? So you're rewarded, right, in your own personal statistics. Basketball, right, a lot of statistics, keep track, and that way baseball tracks 1,000 million statistics. But there are statistics in so many sports that we have around the assist, and it made me think about creating those environments where you reward the helper as well as the person who happens to be in the spotlight, right? And creating an environment where that is the norm is really something magical. And that's where you've got a multiplicative environment. That's where you've got a team of multipliers, a team of leaders. And that's really some magic. It reminds me of a TikTok I just watched where I think it was a woman who was actually talking about DEI activities, right, around inclusion and diversity and things like that. And they were talking about the saying where everybody has their slice of the pie, right? Make sure everybody gets a slice of the pie and something like that. And she said that one of her mentors told her that it's not the slice of you shouldn't be eating pie. You should be eating from the garden, because then the seeds drop back down and then it's like this perpetual ever growth. And so really changing the narrative around that scarcity mindset, right? Oh, there's not enough. I have to hold my Rolodex close to hopefully everyone knows what a Rolodex is, by the way. I have to hold my Rolodex close to my chest because there's not enough to go around. But if you sit in a garden rather than sitting at a pie that will, the pie pan will be empty, the garden will flourish for, in perpetuity. That, changing that mindset and creating an environment where the helping each other, right? Me dropping the seeds and you dropping your water as we commune together, that creates, the watermelon for the next person who, comes around. So clearly I'm a little hungry here thinking of all the food, but.
Right. But isn't that the great thing about eating from or feeding from books, right? The value that we're getting from a book. Yeah. So an author, in this case, a very extraordinarily talented athlete, Pat Williams, decided to write this story about Coach Wooden, which is based on stories that players told about Coach Wooden, that was all based on the lessons that Coach Wooden's dad taught to him. And now I read the book. I was resonating with certain parts of the book, I shared it with you, Sam, and we said, hey, let's bring it to the School of Thoughts podcast on What's on Your Bookshelf. Andy said, yep, let's put it in the lineup. And here we are able to share with one another. And it's exactly what you're talking about as far as this garden and feasting together and being able to plant seeds and grow and flourish together. And in this particular chapter, even, there's a statement that says that John Wooden, above all, was a teacher. And Bill Walton said this about him. He said he taught life, not basketball. The way he taught us how to learn changed my life. So sometimes you may pick up a book and think, well, this book is this one thing, but you can learn so much more from it than just that. And same in work, right? You could take a job because you like the job title, or maybe you like the name of the company, the brand of the company, but it's what you learn over your tenure in that experience, the relationships you make, the things that you learn, the results that you have, the way that you grow that really matters. It's only just the first day when you take that job that gets you in the door. It's what you do once the door's open for you.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think I've ever worked with anybody who does that better than you, Denise. Like, you're one of those, you're the great connector of people. I feel like I think there's like not a story that I don't tell you or something we don't talk about. We're like, oh, I know this person who could do whatever. We should talk to them, or we should do whatever. And every story of yours is this person leads to this person, and you talk about that. But I mean, you live this value so well of that opening up and helping other people and pulling people up to wherever you are and whatever situation that you're in. It's one of the things that I really admire about you. And, when I think about, John Wooden in this book, right, it's about living those principles about helping others. And, I think I'm a better helper because I spend time with you and people like you, right, who help others. Like, oh my gosh, this person's helping other people. Like, I could do that. That's not that hard. I could get in. I could get in the game and help somebody do something.
It's so much more rewarding. So much more rewarding. I mean,
it's the warm and fuzzies.
Yes, I think about how lonely it is if you're climbing to the top, but all that you did to get there was step on other people to get to the top. It's so much more fun to walk with people to get there. And you were talking even just about the help that comes through others that you don't even expect. There's a story in the book that references Dale Murphy. Now, the funny thing about this is this story about Dale Murphy was not a story from John Wooden or John Wooden's life. It was a story that came from Pat Williams. And so funny story about it was that Pat Williams actually, even though he's known maybe for his career in the NBA and the fact that he created the Orlando Magic, now it's in the news that he's trying once again to bring a Major League Baseball team to Orlando. I'm crossing my fingers on that one. But he started his career in baseball. And so, Andy, I know this will resonate with you as a former baseball player. Sam, you've got a little one that's playing baseball. I grew up in a town in New York where we didn't have soccer up there when I was younger. So we only played baseball, hockey, and figure skating. Like that was all there was. So I played Little League until they kicked me out for being a girl. But there's this story in the book about Dale Murphy. And Dale Murphy is a retired Major League Baseball player that had a long career with the Atlanta Braves. I spent most of my adult career in Atlanta, so I'm very familiar with just how he was on, but also off the field, which is also what we're learning here about John Wooden. And what we learn about Dale Murphy is no different than John Wooden. He won tons of awards as a successful athlete, but really set Dale Murphy apart was what he did by how he lived his life and how he lifted up young people. And so the story goes on in this chapter about helping others, about what he did to help young people, but what he did to also raise awareness about the detriments of taking the wrong direction when you're going down the road of life. And Dale Murphy, as an athlete, used his position of power and fame and success to actually have a platform to help young people learn about the ill effects of things like drug use. And so one of the things that stood out to me about this chapter of helping others is that you were mentioning this earlier, Sam, before we started the show, which is about helping yourself first. And Dale Murphy was an example of somebody who doesn't just preach about clean living. He actually practices what he preaches and always has and always will. And it was quite a testimony about him from Pat Williams in the story, which sort of goes to say this idea when you're on the airplane and they say, okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we take off, let us give you some of the safety announcements. If for some reason we have an incident where the oxygen masks need to come down, first put it on yourself before helping someone else. So if you help yourself first, you're able to have the capacity to help others. And I think that the success in that comes from the fact that if you are okay with who you are as a person and you can live up to your values and live your success, or as John Maxwell says, that we talked about this last episode, that success doesn't satisfy once you've tasted significance in life, that's the way to really live out these principles. It isn't about you really at the end of all of it. It's about you to only the degree where you learn self-awareness about yourself, but about why that matters to helping others. And I know at the end of this chapter, Sam, there's a quote that you mentioned early on in our recordings of these episodes that really struck you about what it takes to have peace of mind. So do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, success is peace of mind that comes from knowing that you've done like the best that you can do, is essentially what the quote is. And yeah, I think I love everything you're saying, Denise, about, it's that saying of you can't pour from an empty cup, but it reminds me of leadership and creating safe spaces. And when you think if you're a leader who wants a team of helpers, people who look to the left and to the right of them and do the right thing and do the thing that needs done for somebody else, you have to create the environment. That's what CoachWooden does, right? He creates those safe spaces. He creates that space where you can give the assist because it's just as important as making the shot. And you have to create that environment where it's not the cutthroat, environment. When we had the Great Resignation going on and, all of that, and there was other research going on about that, the cutthroat environment made the list of like the top 5 reasons why people leave an environment. And you as a leader are the person who creates an environment of safety in helping others, right? Where it's not just, if I don't look out for me, nobody looks out for me, because at the end of the day, we have to look out for ourselves. It's hardwired into ourselves as human beings. But helping is that I'm safe enough in where I'm at, right? I can get my mask on first and I can breathe oxygen before I help you do that. But that's where leadership comes in. You have to be the person who creates that environment as the coach, as the leader, as the boss, as the manager, who says, hey, we're going to be successful. We're going to have this peaceful environment of success in helping others, right? And when the buddy next to you is not, it is in distress or needs help, you're the person that says, it's going to be fine. Like, let me help you. Let me pull you in. That's so important.
So when you help others, would you all agree that when you help others, people want to give more? So just like if you were to say, if you are a people leader that nobody wants to follow, they're going to be the people on your team who are the 9-to-5ers. You could look at it in the stats at your company: leadership trust, employee productivity, engagement, retention, right? All those things. If you help others be all they can be, how much more will people go that extra mile and do something even extra? And so there's a story in the book that I think really hit you, Sam, where it talks about how there was a different person that was building something completely out of their comfort zone scope that ended up needing help from people. And what happened in this particular story where someone gave everything they had, which to someone else may have seemed insignificant?
Yeah, it's the story of Danny Thomas, who's the founder of St. Jude's Children's Hospital, which I think most people are probably familiar with, but it's the children's hospital that anybody can go to for free, right? And there's a million stories on St. Jude's and how amazing that is. But the story in this book, it talks about Danny Thomas going around and, wanting to start this and going around for, collecting money, visiting hospitals, that sort of thing. But he gets to a hospital in Chicago, I think. And a little boy runs up and he hears, right? He's like, Danny Thomas, if you're here, I really need to see you. And Danny looks over and it's this 11-year-old boy named Billy Johnson who is in a wheelchair, blind, has palsy, and he was abandoned. He was an orphan, no family, really just a lot stacked against him in the world. But the boy, Danny Thomas approached the boy and he handed him an envelope, and in the envelope, 75 cents. And he said, I've been saving my candy money. I want to use this to build that hospital for kids. And of course, like Danny, like I can feel myself getting choked up just thinking about it. But like Danny Thomas is like weeping, and he takes that 75 cents, never uses it for the hospital directly, but indirectly takes that and tells the story over and over and over again, right? And appeals to the emotion of other people and raises the millions and millions he needed to start St. Jude's. And I think that the 75 cents is actually inside of a statue outside of St. Jude's, right? Like it's that money is part of the foundation of what built the hospital. This boy helping and giving in this space that was really like, right, 75 cents is nothing. That 75 cents doesn't build a hospital, but 75 cents built that hospital, right? And I think about, St. Jude's still has kind of this vibe to it, right? Like how many times is it like just 75 cents? Well, isn't that in their commercials? Like just 75 cents will help us, do whatever, right? It's still part of it. Like, I'll just give a little bit. And that's, when you think about helping others, you don't have to help them solve all their world problems that they've got. It's just a little bit of help does such a big thing. And a little bit of help plus a little bit of help plus a little bit of help times a little bit of help, all of a sudden you've made a real difference in the world. And I think that that's something really, really, really amazing.
Yeah, that's a really amazing story here, because it may seem like he only gave a little, but to Billy Johnson, he gave everything that he had.
Yeah.
And, in the book, it says that Danny Thomas once said, all of us are born for a reason, but all of us don't discover why. Success in life has nothing to do with what you've gained in life or accomplished for yourself. It's what you do for others. And then later, his daughter, Marlo Thomas, who is also a famous actress, she said, my father said there were two kinds of people in the world, givers and takers. The takers may eat better, but the givers will sleep better. And when I thought about this story, I also got choked up, like you were saying, Sam, as well, because it got me to thinking about my kids. My kids, Olivia and Vincent, in 2009, we were living in Atlanta. I mentioned that's where I spent most of my professional career. And our home was destroyed in a massive flood. It was a presidentially declared federal disaster site where my home and 1,800 other homes were destroyed. But all I saw at that particular time was all the loss. We were seeing our house 20 feet under sewage water, throwing things away, memories and gifts and clothes and belongings and dumpsters full of things. You can't even imagine what we had to throw away. But each night when we would leave the disaster site, I would go to my kids who were being helped by people that were letting them stay with them during the day, people who were feeding them, people who were clothing them. Meanwhile, my husband and I were at the house where people were helping us throw away everything down to the electrical wires behind the sheet wall. I'm telling you, everything was thrown away. Now, we could have taken that experience and taken it in one way and thought of it as an obstacle. But what my kids did was they saw it as an opportunity. Years later, we moved to Florida. And one day my daughter was in the 5th grade and she said, Mom, I want to do something to give back and to help others because of the people that helped us. We'll never remember them. Maybe we didn't know their name. They came from all over the country to help us. And so I asked Olivia what she wanted to do, and she came to me with an idea to start a club. It was originally a club for her and other kids to just help other people. And so the name of her club turned into her organization called Save the Earth Projects, or STEP for short. And Olivia was setting out just to help her soccer team at the YMCA. We live in a very middle class or lower middle class town. So a lot of the kids at the Y can't even afford to play there. They're on free and reduced lunches at school. And basically kids need scholarships just to be able to play soccer. And so Olivia wanted to raise some money, but we didn't want to sell, overpriced candles and wrapping paper and those types of things. We wanted something unique. So Olivia came up with an idea where she wanted to collect gently used shoes and deploy them around the world to people in need. And in return, it was going to raise some funds to give to the YMCA for kids who couldn't afford to play. So she set out with this goal where all she needed to do was collect 100 pairs of shoes, and it would equate to $50, which would allow one child to play an entire season. Like that would be for their kit, for their, their ball, the whole thing. So when we first started out, I thought to myself as an adult, where in the world are we going to get 100 pairs of shoes? I'm thinking like we have a couple pair in the garage. How are you going to get 100? And Olivia said, don't worry about it, Mommy. The shoes will come. The shoes will come. And so we set out on this adventure in November of 2010 at Thanksgiving time. And by Christmas, Olivia actually didn't collect the 100 pairs of shoes. She collected 1,500 pairs of shoes.
Wow.
So we knew then there's something more to this, and there's something more we can do to help people who are in need. And there will be other people that want to help us help other people. And so now she's deployed almost 90,000 pairs of shoes around the world since she started, all because she just wanted to do something because someone helped us.
Yeah.
And I think that's for me what I learned from that story.
Yeah, I remember the first time it was before you and I really knew each other, Denise, like we were on teams together, but didn't know each other that well. But I remember the first time you emailed the team and was like, hey, if anybody wants to donate shoes, my daughter has this thing. And I just remember thinking, what kind of teenager is collecting, like has a charity and is collecting shoes? And I was blown away by that. Like, I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh. And then I kept thinking like, what kind of a parent is Denise? And, that she's created this beautiful person who does that. Right. But that's what it is. It comes from people helping people. Right. And I remember thinking, my husband and I just ran a charity event to raise money, for some medical research on a really rare genetic disorder. And I remember, and I thought of Olivia when we started doing this. I was like, I don't know anything about creating an event. Like, oh my gosh, this is like, it was completely overwhelming. I'm Googling stuff and I'm like, listen, if a teenager can do this, a 36-year-old woman can do this. Like, I got this. I can handle it. We can do hard things. Other people have done hard things. We can do hard things. And so it's in helping others. We don't only just, that it's not just that direct help, right? It's the inspiration around that. If you can do that, right? And then I had people after the event say, how did you do this? What's the formula for this? How is it? I'm like, listen, this is not that hard. Like, turns out it's really actually not that difficult. But the key to something, anything, right, is in all that degrees of separation from folks, right? It's that it wasn't that we ran a successful event, right? It wasn't that Olivia, by herself in a vacuum with you helping her, like did this shoe thing, right? It was the people who show up and help in those moments, right? Our event would have never gone anywhere without the volunteers, without the donations, without all of this stuff that ended up being super successful. And then all the people showing up day of, participating, helping us, doing whatever. My grandma has this great saying about you just do what your hands find to do. Like there were so many people who show up and do that, right? Like, oh, I have a pair of shoes. I could send them over, right? Like that kind of stuff is what does it. And we miss so much of that impact sometimes. I think we put helping up on a pedestal that it doesn't really need to be on. Helping is just doing what's right in front of you to do.
It's just doing, and you feel so good about it. And I know we're almost out of time for today, so maybe we'll close with something that John said that really struck me, and I know it struck the both of you, is that he said, I just wish I could have done more. And he was being honored by players that thought he already did more than they expected him to do, but he just wished he could have done more. So as we do normally, we like to close with holding ourselves accountable. I hope that everybody got value from this lesson today in this chapter on helping others. The first chapter was on being true to yourself, and our next chapter will be on making each day your masterpiece. But why don't we go around real quick, Andy? This started because it was your idea to do this when we very first kicked off the podcast. What's something that you're thinking from what we learned today that you want to do to hold yourself accountable till next time?
Yeah, no, I think a sign of a good leader is always looking to do more, right? And I think I love the way that this chapter ended with just saying, I wish I could have done more, even though he has all these awards. But I think for me, it is just to do more, right? Is to look for more ways. Well, what else can I do? Where can I add value? Is there something that I can maybe do in the community to help out? Even if it's, donating shoes, like you were talking about, like anything that I can do to make an impact and help others. Maybe it's pointing to somebody who had the assist, just doing those little things can really add up. So for me, I just want to continue to do more every day, every week, every month. That's really what it comes down to for me, I think.
That's beautiful. Sam, how about for you?
I think for me, I want to spend some time in being conscious of the helpers in my life, right? So often, like, we go past things, or I'm thinking of the Fred Rogers quote about looking for the helpers, right? In a bad moment, looking for the helpers. And that's what you always find. And so I think maybe finding the smaller moments of helpers in my life throughout the next week and really sitting in that recognition so that I can get to that gratitude and get to that maybe copycatting so that I can be a helper as well.
That's awesome. I think for me, I will say I want to spend the next week looking for opportunities to help. So whether that means for me figuring out what do people need help with, what are the things that I know that I could help people with, what are the things I don't yet know that I could learn that would help others, and what are the opportunities that are within that. So I'll also close. I know we talked a little bit about Olivia. We could use all of your help if you're listening. If you have shoes you no longer wear and they are gently used or new and you just want to clean out your closets or your garage, please visit us at Save the Earth Projects with an S on the end, savetheearthprojects.com. And thanks to the help of people like Zappos, we can provide free shipping labels to anyone in the United States. And thanks to the company Souls for Souls, they take the shoes and deploy them around the world for people in need. Andy, I'll let you close us out for today, but it's always a pleasure to be here with both of you.
Yeah, this was a really, really great conversation. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. And we hope that everybody that's listening right now, we hope you enjoyed this. We are on all platforms, as I said, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a lot of different platforms. So please subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode, where we've been having episodes weekly, and that will be, we're going to continue to keep coming. So we're going to have a lot of great content coming out. So we really appreciate it if you could subscribe and send us some feedback as well. We love hearing from our listeners. So for myself, Andy Hughes, Denise Russo, Sam Powell, our producer, Scott Miller, this has been another edition of the What's on Your Bookshelf podcast. Thanks for listening.